what's up everybody? It's Lids, and we're back for some more Gwent, and today we're playing the new Patience is a Virtue seasonal event, which is an alternate game mode in which at the start of our turn, every card in our hand will get transformed into a random card that costs 1 provision more. That means that normally we would have 0 control over the cards that we play, unless we use this specific strategy that gives us an amazing finisher. Let's go take a look at the deck. Alright, so today we're going to play a Northern Realms Pincer Maneuver deck, because Pincer Maneuver is one of the only ways to guarantee that you can play a certain card before this event makes it transform into something random. And there are 3 specific cards that we will build around. Erland of Larvik, King Foltest, and King Radovid. All the other cards are practically insignificant because they'll get transformed into something else and we have no idea what that'll end up being. But here's the plan. As we're choosing our cards in round 1, we need to make sure that we do not have King Radovid, King Foltest, or Erland in our hand, otherwise they will transform and we won't be able to use them. So these need to be in our deck at the start of the match. And if you happen to get all 3 of them in your starting hand and you only have 2 redraws, then prioritize getting rid of Erland, and prioritize getting rid of Foltest. Radovid is nice, but technically not mandatory. Then every other card in this deck costs 4 provisions, which means you have a whole lot of cards that are likely to turn into 5 provision bronze units. So on your first turn, you just want to play whatever random 5 provision cost bronze unit you happen to get. If you can, try to pick one that has high enough base power that it is unlikely that your opponent will be able to remove it with damage. Then, on your second turn, use a leader ability charge at the beginning of your turn to get Foltest into your hand and put whatever you want back into your deck. Ideally, it's a unit, but it's not a huge deal if it isn't. And by playing Pincer Maneuver to get Foltest at the beginning of your turn, you can play him before he transforms into something random. Then you play Foltest to the left of whatever bronze unit you've already played, and if you were on blue coin, then use your stratagem on Foltest as well. So at the end of your turn, Foltest will boost that bronze unit, and because we have Devotion, that unit that gets spawned at the bottom of our deck will get boosted by 1. All of that is to set up a more powerful round 3 finisher, which we'll talk about in just a second. Then once you have Foltest down there, your cards in your hand will continue to get randomized, so play whatever is best. If you can do anything to help protect Foltest, like boost him up or give him a defender, then once Foltest is on the board doing his thing, on any subsequent turn, if you don't like your hand, you can use your second Pincer Maneuver charge to get Radovid at the beginning of your turn, play him, and get that Pincer Maneuver charge back. So at worst, you avoided a bad hand, and you still have 1 Pincer Maneuver charge remaining, even if Radovid gets destroyed on your opponent's next turn. However, if Radovid does live to your next turn, you can use his order ability to get another Pincer Maneuver charge back. That means you'll have 2 remaining. That way, at the very least, we still have a charge remaining to use Erland in round 3. But if you do have time to use Radovid's order, then you get an extra Pincer Maneuver charge to use however you'd like. And if Foltest is still out there and you need additional points in round 1, that might mean getting a Dun Banner to play next to Foltest. That way, you'll create the copies of the Dun Banner, but those Dun Banners will immediately get summoned onto the board. Or if you get a random card in your hand that you like, alternatively, you can use that Pincer Maneuver charge to put that card back into your deck and save it for later, in case you get a tutor. Then just continue to play whatever the best random cards happen to be for the rest of round 1 and or round 2. Just make sure that in between rounds you don't accidentally draw into Erland. Because in round 3, assuming that Erland is still in your deck, on your second to last turn, use your last leader ability charge to get Erland into your hand at the beginning of your turn, then play him. Adrenaline 3 will be active, so he'll gain immunity. Your opponent won't have any way to directly target him, making it extremely difficult for them to remove him. And then on your last turn, play whatever your last card is, and of course, most importantly, activate Erland's order, which should be huge, because in case you didn't notice, we have 35 units in this starting deck. That is why all of the other cards that don't really matter are 4 provision cost units, so we can fit in as many as possible, giving Erland as many targets as possible to boost up in your deck, making his order ability bigger. And assuming you had at least some luck with Foltest in round 1, putting boosted units into your deck, that will of course make Erland even stronger, making Erland an extremely powerful finisher that your opponent will not be able to match. So there's a look at the deck, and like I said, it is built around guaranteeing that you can play at least 2, if not 3, or possibly even 4 cards from your deck, giving this deck the consistent points that are particularly hard to come by in this event. So without further ado, let's go see it in action. Alright, so going up against Nilfgaard here, and they'll go first. Alright, and we do have Erland in our hand, and that is no good. We gotta get rid of him. And then Radovid is another card we'd very much like to keep in our deck. Okay, so that's much better. Alright, they'll go with Etenay first. That's pretty big. Solid start. Whereas, of course, all of our cards here are going to start at just 5 provisions, so we're going to be slower start and then ramp up over time. However, Raging Bear is a solid option here. Bear in mind, any card we play now is likely to be the card that we create additional copies of using Foltest, and this is particularly good because it's 8 power, so it's hard for them to remove it. And this is one of our few opportunities to get a bronze unit out here, because our cards are eventually going to get high enough provisions that bronze units are going to be hard to come by. And then also, of course, on first turn, it doesn't actually damage any of our own units, so useful in that sense as well. Okay, they're going to remove it with Curse of Corruption, though. So in that sense, yes, they did still have a way to get rid of it. Fortunately, though, we do have a few different ways to still get a bronze unit out here. Either a Fallen Knight or a Self-Eater. I suppose we can go Self-Eater here. Okay, then they'll have Taller, which will make this round go longer, which is actually a good thing for us. Oh, no, you didn't! No, you didn't just force us into drawing into Radovid. Alright, I mean, he's a nice-to-have. He's not strictly a need-to-have. So maybe we'll still be fine here. If that were Erland, that would have been catastrophic. Because Erland is definitely top priority, then probably Foltest, then Radovid. But Radovid actually does turn into Milva Sharpshooter, and she does have a 2-power target to remove, putting her back into our deck, which is a little tempting. Otherwise, we would go with Foltest here. But you know what? It's a new card. Let's give it a chance. So we play it. She has Zeal. We can destroy that card there, put Milva back into our deck, and if we happen to move one of their units again, then we can get her back out. Okay, now they're going with their Defender. Shouldn't matter too much. At least not at this point. Nothing that we're terribly concerned about in their melee row. Alright, so now this is when we use a Leader Ability Charge on Foltest. And we'll put something back into our deck. How about Idoran? Then we play Foltest. Boost and create copies of this Self-Eater. That will create additional boosted units in our deck to make Erland more powerful in round 3, and we will use our last Leader Ability Charge in round 3 on Erland. And again, more defenders. Speaking of defenders, we'll get a couple here as well, and I think that is worth doing because Foltest is a little bit vulnerable, so we do want to keep this combo going as long as possible, and Cave Troll definitely helps us do that. We would have, if we had still had Radovid in our deck, used our next Leader Ability Charge on him instead and get a few other Leader Ability Charges from him. That would give us a Leader Ability Charge on Erland for round 3 and one additional one to spare. But of course, Radovid, we drew into him when they played Taller, so that is no longer an option. And he would have helped to fix this hand. We did draw into Onsace, but it's going to be a little hard to find a good dueling target for him when they have so many defenders and they have armor or shields. That's not the best fit. We don't have traps. We don't have good coup de grace targets. Jan is one of the new cards, which would mean we would put Erland at the top of our deck, which is a little scary because it makes it possible for our opponent to steal him, which is obviously not a good thing. He is the highest in terms of points, but I think we want to avoid that potential scenario. Just go with Detloff here. It's obviously not ideal. But it is at least lower risk. Okay, they'll go with Dandelion. So that'll give them him and then one other card. And it's Saskia. So some Harmony synergies there. They already have a Scoia'tael unit here. We get another Milva for what it's worth. However, this time, we don't have targets for it. We could use Dandelion, but it is dangerous, and especially if we had used Jan on our previous turn, because as we were saying, it would have put Erland at the top of our deck, which would have forced us into playing Erland in round 1, which is not good. He is our round 3 finisher, and we want to save him for that. So instead, I think we probably go Tin Boy here and damage everything in their ranged row. That's looking decent enough to me. Okay, Queen of the Night will purify our defender, it looks like. That does make Foltest vulnerable, although he's had a lot of time to do his thing, fortunately. Then we don't have any Deadeyes on the board to deal damage if we played Vernasil in the melee row, but we could spawn some in the range row for a point slam, and I think that is the best option here. And then they have Imperial Golem, which will get damaged by 2. Making that a pretty good point slam of their own. Okay, Sunset Wanderers will come out onto the board at the end of this turn. Not that that's going to make a very big difference, but we do get a couple of Amphibious Assaults, which we absolutely can use. So let's go this route, and let's deliberately use it if we still have a Dun Banner on that. That way we can spawn additional copies of that with Foltest. But I'm not seeing it here, so it looks like that might have gotten transformed. Instead, in that case, let's use Kaedweni Knight for a point slam. And we could put it next to Foltest, we could put it here. Let's split our boost a little bit between different rows. There's the Sunset Wanderers, and it actually is somewhat significant. Oh, we draw a card, mind you. That is dangerous. We drew into Milva Sharpshooter, not Erland, so thank goodness there. But it is actually the difference between having a 1-point lead and being tied. Okay, they'll go with Swears and seize something. One of those Deadeyes. And we could use Feign Death. It's not very good in this situation. Or we could use Renew to get our Raging Bear back. And then damage Cave Troll, and they can just tank it with the armor. So I think we go that route. Which means that once again, we will have a 1-point lead here. Our last card is going to be Masquerade Ball, because that is going to be the only 15 provision cost card we're going to get here. It may be enough, though, by the looks of things. They have a 3-point lead. We're going to get 1 point from the Foltest boost, and then going to spawn in a 4-power unit with Masquerade Ball. So that should be sufficient. So there it is. We'll win round 1, and we got basically a full round of Foltest boosts and copying. So that is huge. Okay, so we're both on 3 cards here. We could theoretically push for the 2-0 win. However, I do like having last say when we have Erland. That way it's really hard for our opponent to counter it. So I think in that case what we'll do here is we'll dry pass in round 2 and we'll have hard advantage and double last say in round 3. So we'll stick with this here. It does mean that now this card is up to 14 provision, so it gives us a scenario, not so surprisingly. We'll get Masquerade Ball soon thereafter, but I didn't want to put it back into our deck because it would have been a special card, and that's no use for Erland. We'll go with Artists, which is, of course, enough for them to win round 2. Okay, now we just can't have Erland in our hand. Fortunately, we do not. So I think we probably stick with this here. Masquerade Ball will turn back round into a 4 provision cost card on our first turn, but it should have enough time that if we wait to play this toward the end of this round, that it'll be a reasonably powerful card. And we do still have Idoran at 8 provisions, and Blightmaker at 6, so it's not like we're stuck with just low provision cost cards here. Okay, they're going to go with Falibor. Obviously, there are no targets for it to damage, so that's good. Then Colgrim is actually really interesting because although his Adrenaline 1 is not active, as you can see here, there's a pretty sizable difference in our decks at the moment. So if he can live long enough, then that is huge. So you know what? I say, let's take a little bit of a risk here. There's a pretty decent chance they are going to be able to remove him, yes. But given how we have Erland still, I'm not too concerned if this turns into a throwaway card. Alright, and Varaxis. Cannot reset Falibor, because that was a deploy ability, not an order ability. So that means, at least at the moment, Colgrim remains safe. And if we really want to try to make Colgrim work, we could go with Zoltan in the range row for Judah Companion, which will boost Colgrim by 1, getting him up to a 2. It's not exactly the most inspiring of plays, but we don't have any huge plays here, so you know what? Why not? We'll give it a shot. We'll give it a shot. Will Colgrim survive? Maybe, maybe not. Ultimately, we still have Erland to fall back on, so I'm not too worried about it, but it would be nice. Alright, Masquerade Ball. I suppose not terribly surprising. It is very likely for our opponent to get that at some point here. Then Procession of Penance is terrible in this situation. Damnation is at least a 6, as is Dulla. Oriana is a 6 with some potential for a little bit more, so I guess we go for her. Oh, except she doesn't count herself in the vampire count, so no. I mean, we'll see if we get another vampire, but it's pretty unlikely. Okay, they get Triss. So they're getting more boosts. Well, it doesn't really matter, because cards in your hand are going to change. But they still really want damage to get rid of Colgrim, and they have not yet found it. Alright, Isengrim's a 4. Sigvald is probably an 8. And Saoirse is probably a 6, so let's go Sigvald. And then on our next turn, we will need to play Erland. So this is their last card. It's Ildiko. But the timing just doesn't quite work with Varaxis, so they can use all their leader ability charges to boost, yes, but Ildiko's order ability will remain unused. So now remember, we need to use Erland on this turn, so don't get distracted by either of these cards. They are irrelevant. We need Erland. And then we'll put back, I suppose, Yen, just because she's a unit, so it does have a bit of a synergy with Erland. So we'll play him here. And sure, he gets a status that boosts Thirsty Dame, but we actually did manage to have Colgrim survive. We'll just cancel out that boost you just got. There goes Colgrim getting a huge boost, which is already enough. But, you know, we gotta see how much this is worth, right? Sure, we'll play Eskel. We'll get a little more damage. And then how big is Erland, you ask? Pretty big. Pretty big. Alright, so going up against Syndicate here. And they'll go first. Okay, and there are 3 cards that we don't ever want to see in our hand. Those are Erland, King Foltest, and Radovid. And we have 2 of them in our hand right now. So let's get rid of them. Okay, and no Radovid, so that's great. Let's start with Camby. Alright. We did lose a card in the process, of course. But I suppose we'll live. And now what we're looking for is a card that we want to create copies of using Foltest, which means either something big and tanky that our opponent won't be able to destroy on their next turn, so that could be Failed Experiment, or that could be Nilfgaardian Knight, or we go with Crow Messenger, which, if we find a way to play it later on, could be quite interesting. So let's go for that. A little bit riskier, because at just 4 power, it is definitely in removal range. Okay, and no, we do not have any of those artifacts in our starting deck, so that is just a 3-point play for a 10 provision card. That is a little painful for them. Now what we want to do is we want to use our first leader ability charge, get Foltest. So let's do that. And let's put a unit back in our deck, one that might be useful to us later on. Like, say, possibly even Vincent. Then we'll use Foltest next to this Crow Messenger, and in doing so, boost that up and create copies of it in our deck. And because this card does technically have synergies when we have numerous copies of it, there may be some long-term potential there. But of course, Foltest is also vulnerable here. Could get locked, could get destroyed. They have damage. It's not going to be enough to destroy anything other than just our little volunteer there. But if we have a way to protect Foltest further, that would definitely be nice. Unfortunately, we do not, and none of these cards are particularly inspiring here. So what we might do is we might go Pincer Maneuver here to get Radovid, because remember, of course, by using Radovid, we can get some leader ability charges back. Let's put Vess in our deck, and then play Radovid here. That'll give us 1 more Pincer Maneuver charge. And then, assuming they don't get rid of Radovid, then we can get another one back on our next turn. Okay, they'll go with Fallen Rayla. And they will spend those coins, and her Adrenaline 5 is active here, so she gets boosted in the process. Thalabor is the highest base power unit, so we could destroy that with Glorious Hunt. I don't think this is Sneck time. And the highest unit from our deck would be a Cursed Knight, but I don't really think we want to do that, so I think we probably do go Glorious Hunt here. And let's get a leader ability charge back. Okay, they'll go with Selkirk. And they will probably use him to get rid of Foltest on our next turn, unless we have a way of protecting him here. And actually, we do. Remember, we got extra charges of Pincer Maneuver, so we have some to spare here. I was thinking we might use it on Vess in round 3 to set up a last turn Erland, but instead we can go Vincent here. Put one of these cards back. Then use Vincent on Selkirk. No, it wasn't fast enough. Okay, well, we distracted them. We did distract them with Vincent, so you know what? It worked. Not the way I thought it was going to work, but we'll take it. And of course, we still need to hold on to our last Pincer Maneuver charge in round 3 for Erland. Okay, they'll go with Royce, and they have 15 cards in their deck. We'll be looking to boost with that. Oh, and okay, that's perhaps why they were not using Selkirk to duel Foltest. They had another way to get rid of him. But we did get several turns out of Foltest, so you know what? Can't really complain about that. And in this case, let's use Ivar Evil Eye to switch power with Fallen Rayla. And Royce will give them a pretty big boost here. They'll go with Masquerade Ball. It looks like they may be at the point now where most of their cards cost a ton of provisions, and they're not going to be able to do much with that Masquerade Ball. Well, we can go Fallen Rayla if we'd like. It's not quite enough points for us to catch them, but it is a solid play, and if they pass, then we can go a card down and win in round 1, and dry pass in round 2. So, you know, I think we still go for it here. Let's use the Tribute. That'll boost her up. Oh, and I suppose getting Veil does mean Thirsty Dame gets 1 point, but so be it. Okay, they'll go with Yaga. Which notably does not have any targets to consume. In fact, is extremely unlikely to ever have targets to consume in this event, because volunteers are 0 provisions, so that does not work. And this Crow Messenger is a 5, so they can't consume that either. Obviously, everything else is much higher than that. We get Unseen Elder here. Let's go with that. We do have Devotion, and this is one of the reasons why we deliberately keep Devotion. We'll bleed. I mean, Yaga doesn't really matter all that much, so I'm not that concerned about it, to be honest with you. And we have now taken the lead back. They have Riot Sappers. Oh, and they'll consume their own unit. Okay, not that that makes a huge difference here. They will use at least 1 leader ability charge. Make it 2 leader ability charges. Okay, so that's how they're banking on getting the win here. However, we do now have Great Oak, which especially when combined with Unseen Elder, should be enough here. So let's just boost this guy. And there we have it. That's enough points already. Get a little bit out of Unseen Elder as well. So we'll take the round 1 win in a very long round 1. Okay, so top priority here is just making sure that we don't get Erland. We need to save him for round 3. And we don't draw into him here, so that's fine. We could go for the bleed, or could just go for the 2-0 win. In a short round such as this, that basically means playing 1 card, then going Erland, and leaving it at that. The only thing is that we won't have last say, so it's debatable as to whether that's worth doing. Let's try swapping one of these out, and then, okay, we get Master Mirror, which is actually not a bad thing. Just wanted to make sure that we didn't get Erland there. But it does mean now that we have other cards that will be higher provision here. We got into Detloff Higher Vampire at 10 provisions, rather than being stuck with only 5 provision cost cards. And tempting as it is to go for the 2-0, I think I'd like to be absolutely certain that we get the win by waiting until round 3, because it means we'll get card advantage and double last say. So they'll take the round 2 win. Okay, so we did draw into Erland, and again, we absolutely cannot have him in hand, otherwise he will transform before we get the chance to play him. We're going to use our leader ability to get him instead. So other than that, though, that means we have plenty of flexibility here to take whatever we want to take. We do have a little bit of a variety in terms of provision costs here. Triss at 11, Brain at 6, Wereat also at 6. Other cards were drawn into at 4, so I think this can work. Okay, they'll go with Roach. Obviously, they don't have anyone to damage with him. And Gesros is not a bad card. I think we probably do want to play him because he is our highest provision cost card. If we don't, then he's going to increase his provision cost and eventually turn into a scenario that is probably not going to help us. So let's go for him. Does mean we're passing up the opportunity to just outright remove Roach, which would be kind of nice, but this is going to turn into something that's actually usable on our next turn, whereas Gesros probably was not. And they're just going to forfeit. So we'll take the win. No Erland necessary. So there's a look at a powerful Northern Realms Erland deck for the new Patience is a Virtue seasonal event. If you liked the video, then make sure to hit the like and subscribe button and leave a comment down below to let me know which other cards, archetypes, and factions you'd like us to experiment with next. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you next time.